At Grassroots News, we are committed to telling the truth of a story with integrity and honesty. We want to create a platform of news that people can go to trust and let other outlets trust us. That people know if they see a Grassroots News story, it is a story of truth. And a lot of that, I just want to kind of give us some tips. These may be a little bit random, but just something to think about as you're putting your story together. And a lot of these tips may work for a breaking news story, but not a human interest story. They may work for a human interest story, but not a controversial story. There's a lot of different stories, and there's a lot of different rules about which story you might be working on. But first of all, let's just talk about story selection. What is your focus? What are you trying to communicate? To be news, it's got to be a little bit out of the ordinary. There has to be something happening. If you are around it and you hear people talking about it, there may be a story there. And you've got to figure out, why is this story important? And it may be the why of the story, or it may be the what of the story, but you've got to figure out kind of, what am I going to tell? What am I going to communicate in this story? Now, is it breaking news? Is there, in a breaking news story, it's more just straight facts. You want that who, what, where, why, when. You want to interview witnesses. You want to get people who have seen things, people who have experienced, people who, know a little bit more about it, from a perspective that we can get a witness, an eyewitness to what happened. If it's an issue, if it's a conflict, if it's a little bit controversial, you have got to have both sides to that story. You can't just have one side of the story and let people get another side, somewhere else. In a controversial story, you've got to have both sides covered. We need to hear from both sides, and you may, kind of form an opinion where you've got that, but that's not our point. That's not our job to form an opinion or to push one side or the other. You need to put both sides out there, and you don't have to come to a resolution. That they can, in a controversial story, there may not be a resolution. That each person is giving their sides, and then whoever's watching it, they can come to a conclusion on their own. But your job is to give both sides. You need to have that neutral view. Now, if it's a human interest story, it still needs to answer the questions of who, what, where, why, when, and why, and how. But typically, your narration will tell the who, what, where, and when, if there is a when to it. And then the why and how comes through the human interest interviews. And usually, typically in a human interest story, there's only one interview, but there might be two, depending on if it's specifically about one person or, kind of something that's happening and several people are involved in it. What can you learn about it before you go do the story? Can you research it on the web? Can you talk to people about it? Can you find just more information so that you are at least informed before you kind of set out to do a story? Make phone calls. If it's something you're trying to track down truth on something, and somebody tells you one thing and somebody tells you another thing, you need to figure that out. Now, if it's an opinion and a controversial subject, you're going to have two views on it. But if it's a fact that you're trying to find out, and you're getting two different people saying something about what you're trying to factually prove, then you need to go to more sources. And typically, we ask you to have 3 sources that say this is correct, that this is the factual thing. Now, a lot of times we can hedge that, but it needs to be in your writing. You need to kind of explain that this is what we know at this situation. And that way you can be honest, so that whatever comes out of your mouth in the narration and whatever you choose to take from the sound bites from the different people, that you know in your heart that it's truth. The research, you can always, try to find a knowledgeable person to interview. If you're doing a story on, say it's on ice fishing, then you're going to want to talk to an ice fisherman. You're not going to want to talk to, somebody that works in the machine shop. There's the way you find your knowledgeable source and go after, look at what your story is about and then find that person that you can interview. A lot of times when you're asking questions of someone, you want to ask questions that will get them to talk, to be at ease. And a lot of that comes out of your curiosity and what you want to know. A lot of times when I'm talking to someone in an interview situations, I will just say a statement and then let them pick up on it. It's not asking them a question. When you do ask a question, you don't necessarily want to ask a yes/no question unless they're real talkative and, kind of move off onto it. But that why and how and those questions where there's going to be a little bit longer answer. When you are shooting, you set up, say this is for the visuals of it, you're going to want to get a lot of different shots. And I know there's, loads of information out there about, composition and what you're looking for. But when you're videotaping, you want to make sure you've got enough to cover your story. And that's typically, you want to get a lot of different angles and a lot of different shots so that you are kind of in the midst of the action, and if something's going on, it's not a time to be shy. You've got to get in there and get what you need to get. You need to make sure that you've got a real variety of shots. I know when I first started videotaping some things, I had always worked at a television station where I had a photographer, but then I started doing kind of one-man band stories on my own, and I was out and I would bring my video back to my photographer friends, and they would just critique it for me. And a lot of times at the very beginning they said, everything you shoot is medium shots. Make sure you get really wide shots, make sure you get really close-ups, so you get that variety of shooting. You want to get plenty of footage so that you can select the best stuff for your edit. More is better when you're shooting, and then that way you can pick the best of the best for your edit. A lot of people ask me about stand-ups and how to do a stand-up. I love to do a stand-up when something is happening in the background. If that, so that you can even refer to it, what's happening there, even turn around, get it, you're in that location. Now, if it is kind of a breaking news story, it really works well to establish yourself at the scene with the stand-up open. And then it's really good to do a stand-up close, because then it can kind of be back, you're back. It may be the same location, or it could be that you're, at a different location. It's a little bit different. You can either kind of do a parentheses, so they saw the same thing at the end as they saw at the beginning, or you can do a totally different one. But at the ending stand-up, a lot of people just, give their name and I'm reporting for Grassroots News. But what I really recommend is to have at least a summary statement, and then that goes into your tag. It'll just be a little bit more seamless if you say, one of your last sentences and then go into your name, reporting for Grassroots News, and your location. Or you can switch that up and put your location first and your name, and then reporting for Grassroots News. But try to do some kind of summary statement before you get to the tag out, and that'll just kind of make it more part of the story rather than just, a little added on tag. In the editing, we do recommend that your stories be under 3 minutes. 1 to 2 minutes, and it depends on what great stuff you have and how complicated the story is and those kinds of things, but we are trying to keep them under 3 minutes. If you've got so much material that you've got 2 3-minute stories, then absolutely we'll take that, but it's got to be really compelling to make it that long. When you're looking at what you've got, what is the most important and what is your best video footage, because that wants to be up front. What are the best sound bites from the interview? Take the best of your best, and that is all about editing. And you think back to the focus of what were you trying to communicate, and put that in the beginning. Get that hook in there, get that, what you're trying to communicate. A lot of times they say, tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. Your story's going to have a beginning and a middle and an end, and that, it's just that flow of things. you're still going to need to look back and make sure you answer those who, what, where, why, when, and why, and how questions. Are they all there? And always give them, why do you need to watch this story? Why do you need to watch this story? A lot of, when you're editing, you want to vary the pace of the shots. Typically, I would have anywhere from 2-second to 5-second shots, but you don't want them all 5-second shots, and you don't want them all 2-second shots. You want to vary the pace. This shot, if it's a simple shot, especially a close-up, you can do it shorter, 2 to 3 seconds. If it's a very wide shot and there's a lot to look at and a lot going on in the shot, that's when you want to have a longer shot, 5, maybe even 7 seconds. If it's if it's kind of a still shot, there's not a lot of action going on in the shot, then it doesn't need to be up as long. But if there's a lot of good action happening, there's the riot demonstration, or just a lot of action in the picture, then you can leave it up longer. I think we talked about earlier, interviews are typically 15 to 25 seconds. I mean, the sound bites that you pick from the interviews are typically 15 to 25 seconds. We recommend that you only use music if the story calls for it. Now, a lot of times there will be music at the location, and if that works into the story, I love natural sound. I think natural sound, more than anything, puts you in the midst of the story. And that's why a lot of times when, the reporter's doing the stand-up and something's going on in the background and you're hearing that, it just puts everyone, you're really in the moment. So that's really good to remember. When you're doing a narration and you're putting your visuals, make sure you've got good nat sound. Now, you may need to take it from somewhere else in the video, so don't always think, you have to be sure that you're, being true to the story and that kind of thing. But sometimes you'll have a really good nat sound, but you're not actually seeing that happen right then. But if you're seeing somebody do something, hammering a nail or whatever, you're wanting to hear that sound. So try to think about that also when you're videotaping. You want to make sure what you're hearing is what you're seeing matches what you're hearing, so that you're actually getting good natural sound that you can use in it. This process all takes practice, and that's what we want to encourage people to do, to practice it. You want to go find your story, shoot your story, edit the story, and then see if it's a story. Show it to people. Is it ready? Is it a Grassroots news story? And it may not be that your first story makes it on Grassroots News. One of the things that you want to practice in the whole shooting and editing is, and if you don't have the story that Grassroots News is going to want to have, go ahead and practice that, because then you're going to have the skills when a story comes along. Because if you wait until you're in the midst of something, then it's like, oh yeah, I got wind in my audio, I got my thumb across the front of the camera, I got, just all these different things that can go wrong. And if you practice beforehand, you're going to have a lot better success at getting that story when it happens in the moment. So just continue to practice. In an interview, a lot of times I like to have them spell their name out on camera. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, okay, let me get your name written out, and then I lose that piece of paper or that notebook or whatever, and I don't have it. But if you have it taped and they actually said how they say their name and how they spell it, maybe their, the title that you might want to put onto a graphic, just have them put it on the tape. You won't ever use that in the editing, but you've always got it there. You want to get close. I mean, we've talked about how, that you want to be an intimate kind of situation. So you want the camera fairly close to them. You want it steady. You want the it in focus. I like to shoot my stand-ups, but that's true, stand-ups as well as my interviews at eye level, that the camera is kind of, because then it's more of an equal. Because if you're shooting, if someone's sitting low on the ground and you've got your camera up here, then it's almost they're looking up and it gives you a condescending attitude. And that's where the visuals aren't actually telling telling the truth. So you want to come down so that you're at eye level. The other way, if your camera's down here and they're up on a step or something, then they're looking down at you, and then even though they may not sound condescending, they may feel condescending just because they're up above you and looking down on you. When I'm interviewing someone, I like to have them just, to move off. Like if I've got a camera, and it's not easy with an iPhone, this is more if you've got a friend holding an iPhone camera, or you've got your camera set up on a tripod, I try to move out. But it's really important when you're interviewing someone to keep that eye contact with them and to nod. You don't want to go, you don't want your ums in there, but to just nod and smile and really keep good eye contact. And that more than anything is encouraging to them. And you can't just kind of glaze over as they're talking, because I think people can know whether you're really getting what they're saying. That understanding is in your eyes. And so that's really important in an interview, to kind of keep that eye contact and keep them knowing that you know what they're saying and that you understand it. And it also, you're just kind of connecting with them so you can help know what the next question is. You need to, just not rush this process. I think especially in, your first stories, there's always going to feel like there's a zillion things to think about. I still have that on some of my, stories that I go out to do, where I've just got so many things to think about, and then I'll come back and I'm like, I didn't have the greatest nat sound for that story. I didn't have the best eye contact with that one, or, there's always those things. So there's just a lot to think about. So each time you come back, it's all about learning from the process. And there's always that, I wish I'd done that a little bit different. And it's still a good story. It's still a story that communicates and can do it. I'm trying to think if there was one more things. I think one of the hardest things, well, let's say this. I think one of the things that will kill your interview the most is wind. And it's one of those things where almost always, every time I do an interview, I make sure I or someone is listening to it. Because, and if you can't do it, listen to it during the interview, look at it right after and listen to it. And especially if it's a short interview, they're not going to mind doing it again. And it could be that they even do it better the second time. So, I think sometimes when I'm putting a story together, even though I love this visual world, a lot of times the audio is what pulls the story through. And so that's why it's important to get good audio. And you want to get, if you don't have the good audio, and a lot of times when you've got a situation where you're trying to interview someone and there's a lot of background noise, that's where you want to just take them around the corner of the building, or take them inside to another location, or just somewhere, because your sound is so important. I'd usually give up a visual. I love visual, interviews that there's a good visual background, but if you're not going to have good audio, I'd give up the visual and take them somewhere where you can get good sound. It comes back to just a lot of practicing. I know when I first was a reporter, you've got a photographer looking out for you. And when I was a first reporter, pretty green at it, there were photographers that would kind of coach me and kind of be my second set of eyes. So if you can find a friend to pair up with and not think that you have to do everything, I really recommend that, because it is a process that you can build a good team. I do a lot of one-man band stuff now, but there are a lot of times that I still wish I had that partner to help out with, making sure that the audio's good, that the mic's in the right place, that the wires aren't showing, and just all the little pieces that you need to put together a good story. And then you also, I find, is that whole thing of two heads are better than one, that you do end up building on each other's creativity, and that you can get a better product with two people doing it than one. Now there also is that place where you guys have two very different ideas of what the story is, but I think that's that part of molding the story into, what story do you have. I just want to encourage you to keep doing it, because I think there's a certain time when you kind of like, oh, I can't, there's just, this story isn't coming together. Well, if that one isn't coming together and there's not a time deadline, pick a different one and go back to that one another time. Or maybe that story isn't supposed to be told and you need to do another one. But I just want to encourage you to keep doing it, keep trying to do it. Find the stories, keep your ears open, be curious, and we need grassroots news stories, so send them in. All right, thanks.